Today was an event that culminated a year-long pilot project to implement complete streets in Baton Rouge.
It is a community issue because if you make streets safe for the older members of the family, then you've made them safe for everybody.
All right, guys, we're going to get started with our second Tech and Tools Making Cities Smarter panel. The first one that we had this morning, for those of you who were here for earlier, I thought that was a great presentations and Q&A from the audience with Joel, Justin, and Greg. We've got three great speakers to follow their act here, and it's going to focus on different tools such as GovSpend, formerly SmartProcure, which is providing government procurement efficiency through invaluable local, state, and federal purchasing data analytics, driving informed procurement decisions and significant cost savings. We had a question from the last go-round related to overcoming procurement challenges. So, Sarah, I hope you save your question for this panel as well. And talking through work in New Orleans around open data's impact on disaster recovery, workforce development, blight reduction, and racial disparity indicators. And then talking through with Dave Baxter of Sparkhound surrounding how information technology and infrastructure helps to power large-scale initiatives and infrastructure investments and support community recovery. I'd like to first introduce, I guess I never introduced myself for those of you who weren't here earlier. My name is John Snow. I'm a vice president and partner with Emergent Method. We're a management consulting firm based here in Baton Rouge. Do work across the state in some other areas of the United States, focused around strategic planning, organizational development, communications, and digital strategy planning. We're honored and excited to be able to sponsor this morning's events and partner with CPEX on this exciting Smart Cities track. I'd like to introduce Stephen Bryan with GovSpend, formerly SmartProcure. Stephen began his career working in New York City as a media buyer for Warner Brothers, and then went on to pursue his passion of operating his own water sport business after negotiating a contract with the state of Maryland. He then went on to join GovSpend as the first sales hire and is passionate about leveraging data to help build efficiencies between the public and private sector. GovSpend is committed to providing government procurement efficiency for government agencies. GovSpend provides invaluable local, state, and federal historical purchasing data analytics, driving those informed purchasing decisions, helping to realize cost savings through procurement in the public sector. And for government vendors, GovSpend informs market opportunities, product trends, and competitive intelligence. Their vision is to become the leading trusted information resource utilized by government agencies to make the best purchasing decisions and by companies in order to win more government business. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Bryan.
I'm a short guy, so I'm going to stand out here so you can all see me. My name's Stephen Bryan. I'm the VP of the Government Division at GovSpend. First off, I want to thank the state of Louisiana, as well as CPEX and the city of Baton Rouge for hosting this event. It's definitely an honor to be here. I want to talk to you about GovSpend today. What is GovSpend? Well, we track government spending. Keep it simple for you. But we want to make it easier for every agency, city, counties to work together, because I'm sure someone else has been faced in the same position that you are today. And it's better to work together, to work as a community to help you reach your goals. So in GovSpend, we have about 380 million purchase orders, and that's across a federal, state, and local level. And it's easy. It's just a Google-like search engine where you can type in any product or service you need. Goes through the system, and any purchase order or purchase that has that keyword will pop up in your results. So you can see who bought it if you need help finding a vendor. And you can also see what price was paid, just to make sure you're getting a fair rate. So when we look at the market, we notice that there's 89,000 government agencies. And out of those 89,000 government agencies, they're spending $7 trillion a year. Trillion. It's a weird word to say. Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all be jealous of that number. And out of the $7 trillion spent, there's about 100,000 buyers, but they have 20 million companies to choose from. Well, that's a lot of choices. I know last week I was going to buy some toothpaste. I was walking around, I saw Cool Mint or White Burst. And there's so many choices. And that's really what makes it so hard. And we talk about difficulties in procurement is when you have so many choices, is what decision do you make? And not only is there a decision of what vendors to use, it's how do you buy? As you can see here, it's a list of methods that purchasing agents, procurement need to use just to be in compliance. We realize there's certain thresholds, and it's just about being in regulations. You can buy off a state contract, you can buy off a co-op, you can go out through a bid or an RFP, you can contact 3 vendors and get your quotes. But at the end of the day, it's about figuring out what method works for you. And if someone else has been in that position before, then why not take that history and that knowledge using big data technology and put it all in one place? And that's what we've done. We have created a solution where you can now see where the city or county or parish or school next door, what they've bought, who they used, and what price they paid. It's all at your fingertips now. No matter if they bought off the state contract or the co-op. Eliminate all that decision-making process, figure it out right at your computer. There's no installation of software. It's all cloud-based. You just log into the website, and you can search your heart out and find whatever you need. This is the Impact. There's a printer here, the M451DN. It's nothing special. It's the one we have in our office. There's actually the M452DN out if you're in the market for a printer. But what we noticed when we ran through our search in GovSpend, that over 71%, actually 71%, has spent more than $400. Then the price range between $350 and $400 was 20%. But then there was this 9% subcategory that spent $350 or less. Now think about it. When you're spending $7 trillion a year, that percentage is a big variance when it comes down to cost savings. You think about, I don't have the budget for this. If you want to update, disaster recovery. It's like, where do you find that money? A lot of it's on these routine purchases. If you're buying your toilet paper or ink and toner, those costs add up, and it can definitely help free up some funds for those projects on your wish list. So I put myself in the shoes of a buyer. I love this slide. It reminds me of the TrueCar commercial. It's one of those chairs I remember sitting in 30 years ago when I was in grade school. The standard, just one piece of plastic molded, 4 metal legs. It's actually called the Verco N19 Metaphor Series chair. Now, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it's a chair that goes in a lot of schools. So you can see on the graph, on the high end, $63 is what some schools paid across the country. Now on the low end, $29. It was actually a school out in California. But the median price is around $42. So as being a buyer, I said, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I went on Google. So I typed it in, brought up the website, $58.95. Okay, I guess that's a going rate for this chair, because I have no idea. And then I went in GovSpend. I typed it in, and this is a rendered version from our system. So we have a patented technology that makes it easy to search, easy to read, all the information across the agencies in the U.S. So you can see here you always have the PO number, the date it was issued, the total dollar amount, the agency that bought it. So this was Roanoke Public Schools. And they went directly to the manufacturer, Verco. And you can see they bought 30 of those chairs for $40.63. So if you looked at the median before, it was $42. So I would feel confident in making this purchase decision and executing the order. Now, let's just say you never worked with Verco before. You can click on the vendor name, and that will bring up contact information, so you get the name, phone number, email address, so you can reach out to them. And we also developed a new quoting system to help make your life easier. It takes 60 seconds to post the quote. You just put the title, description of what you want. Say, Verco chairs or Metaphor Series chairs. In the description, you put how many you need, date you need it by, and then publish. Once it's live, it goes out to all the vendors, and it's 100% in compliance. So it's time-stamped, so you can see when you publish it for your records, as well as when the requests from the quotes come in, so you can track that and have it one place in a PDF for your records. So the benefits of using GovSpend, deal with thousands of agencies all across the U.S. One of the big things is sole source validation. A lot of vendors claim to be sole source. You can just now type it in a search bar and see if another company has sold it or not. Makes it a lot easier. If you want to use it for budgeting purposes, maybe you never bought that before, you just want to see how much it's cost and you don't want to spend time contacting vendors, type it in, see what other agencies have paid. If you want to use it for piggybacking opportunities, another way to buy, someone else has been in their same shoes, so if they did all the hard work, filled out the paperwork, went through the bid and RFP, maybe they have a contract already established, you can just piggyback off of their work and get the same great rate. So there's a lot of benefits, but at the end of the day, we just want to make your jobs easier, help save you time, as well as some money in the process. Our founding members, team right here, Jeff Rubenstein, he's our CEO, founder of GovSpend. He came up with the idea working in the police department. It's the city of Delray Beach, where we're at in Florida. And he had to buy AED defibrillators. And he went out, first thing he did was check to see who they used in the past. Then he decided, he's like, okay, I got my quotes, but why not check with the fire department? And this was in the same city. He contacted the fire department, fire chief, hey, what's up? Who do you use for your AED defibrillators? Who do you buy from? And he found out they were getting a better price. So that's really where the light bulb went off. He said, man, if I didn't check with the fire department, I would have never known that I could have got a better price. So he negotiated with his vendors, got that rate, and they said, I wonder what the city of Miami or Orlando or Jacksonville, what are these other bigger cities that have more buying power doing across our state? And that's where it came from. Now we're across the country in all 50 states. Jim Finolio, he's our CFO, worked for DHL. Jack Siney, he's our co-founder. He used to negotiate contracts with the Navy. And Peter Cagnina, he's the VP of our data department. Actually worked with Jeff at Advanced Public Safety before this company. They had e-ticketing police software. So there's a lot of history and background with our company, either working directly for the municipalities or directly, not with them, but helping them out, trying to make their lives easier. So it's all about using technology and using it to make an impact on our day-to-day, because let's face it, some things, data's exciting to some folks, it's not other, but we try to have fun with it. This was actually my first time in Louisiana. Actually met my first mascot here. Maybe I'll meet the Tiger or Louisiana State, LSU. But if you ever want to take a look, you're faced with a purchasing problem, give us a call. We could type it in, see if we can help you out, and log in for free. So again, really appreciate everyone's time today, and look forward to answering any questions during the panel discussion or afterwards. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. Next, I'm going to introduce Dave Baxter. Dave is the Director of Strategic Alliances for Sparkhound. Dave is an accomplished business and IT veteran with a wealth of diverse experience. I'm not just saying that because it's on the page. I've known Dave for a long time, and he's a highly respected peer and partner, and have known him for a very long amount of years. At Sparkhound, he's been there since 2007, oversees the management of client strategies, business goals, and education, while challenging his team to better understand and fulfill customer needs. He began his career as a network technician with the University of Connecticut Health Center, moved to EDS as a project leader at Exxon, and then spent his next 10 years as IT director for several private and nonprofit agencies, leading his organizations through the computing world's move from the mainframe to Windows and the web. Dave earned a bachelor's degree in psychology at Ithaca College in New York, and is an active member in a variety of professional and civic organizations, both in Baton Rouge and Louisiana. He and his wife have 2 children. Please join me in welcoming Dave Baxter.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the kind words, although they were all untrue for the most part. I apologize. I do not have a presentation today. I was a last-minute addition to the panel today, so I was not given a whole lot of time to come up with a topic today. However, there is a topic that is near and dear to the hearts of us right now, and that is the flood recovery that's happening currently through the Restore Louisiana program and the past recovery programs we've had with the Road Home and future recovery programs that we're likely to have based on our past instances that we've had. Today is a really good day to talk about how we are using data and big data and analytics to be better prepared for these types of disasters that are occurring. Through the Road Home program, which has been going on pretty much about 11 years or so, and our great partners, CGI, are sitting in the back there, and I think Lamar is going to be a speaker soon on this session coming up. They've gathered a tremendous amount of data and have learned a tremendous amount about recovery programs through gathering data during the Road Home program. Some of the data that we were able to gather through that program, combined with some of the federal data that Justin talked about earlier and the coastal data, is helping us to build models for predicting where the next disaster areas could potentially occur. For example, when the floods happened last year, of course it was unprecedented areas of the area that flooded, that we have never seen floods before. However, because there was enough data available, we could do some analysis and do some suppositions on where we might find homes that were flooded that we didn't expect to be flooded. So the modeling that was available to us helped us identify neighborhoods that historically had not flooded that we could assign resources to quickly and deploy those resources out quickly to find recovery assets for those folks. So first responders and so forth, of course the Cajun Navy that we have that is unique to our environment, they had better information. Of course, the use of social media as a data point is wildly popular now. Now, things like Waze, Snapchat now tracking people's location, which my daughter did not realize, and I have not told her yet, so I always know where she is, are great ways to use crowdfunded information, not just data that's gathered in giant enterprise systems during these flood recovery things, but data that's gathered from the populace that's using the apps every day on their phones that don't realize they're actually providing very valuable information to the first responders and to the folks that are responsible for helping these homeowners recover. So keep tweeting, keep Snapchatting, keep Facebooking, keep doing those things because that really helps us determine where the resources are needed to get to recovery faster. Being better prepared, think about this. How many people here were in Louisiana during Katrina? Show of hands. How prepared were you when Katrina hit? I was wildly unprepared. I grew up in Connecticut. We didn't have hurricanes very often in Connecticut, once every 50 years maybe. I was wildly unprepared. Thankfully, we were in an area that didn't get the mass devastation that they got in New Orleans, but I was wildly unprepared for that. How many here lived through Gustav? I was moderately prepared for that. I actually had a generator, which I didn't know how to use when it didn't start when I tried to start it up. But I was moderately prepared for Gustav. How many of you here lived through the floods of last year? Do you feel like you were slightly better prepared compared to Katrina and Gustav at the floods of last year? I felt like I was a little better prepared. I had sandbags ready to go. I live in a neighborhood that historically does not flood, although I am in the lowlands, like Greg was talking about, which seems odd that I wouldn't be in a flood area. But I felt like I was a little better prepared. Next time, though, I feel like I'm going to be much more prepared because we have so much more data now to let us know where these disasters could occur. The problem that we have, there's impediments to disaster recovery. And I know Keith is over there shaking his head. He's been through this with us. The policy does not keep up with the technology. And so we have to find ways to help our parish governments, our local municipalities, our state and federal agencies keep up with the way the technology goes. There are certain technologies that we can implement quickly, but things like procurement laws, kind of bind us to say, well, you can't do this because it's going to cost more than $50,000, so now we have to go out for a public bid. And oh, by the way, that public bid is going to take about 6 months to complete, and by that time, you've wasted the opportunity to provide a lot of efficiencies and a lot of cost savings in that effort. So we have to do a lot to help educate public policymakers on how technology can help improve the way that they do their business and be better prepared to save money in the long run. The cost of these programs to do recovery, as you've seen, are astronomical. The $1.6 billion that was allocated to Louisiana post-flood it barely scratches the surface compared to the $12 billion that was immediately allocated to the Houston area after the floods earlier this year. So there's a tremendous amount of money going towards this, and we could limit how much we spend on these programs if we took a proactive approach to preparedness for these programs. One of the biggest areas that we're looking at now in this particular program is the largest bottleneck in a program, and I'll use Restore Louisiana as an example. For those of you that follow the Restore Louisiana task force on Facebook, you see the comments. Oftentimes the people who comment on Facebook posts are typically the unhappy ones, and there's quite a few. The problem is when you do things like damage assessments, you have to have someone go out there and do an individual assessment of every single home that flooded. So when you have 80,000 homes that have flooded, the process to get that done just takes a tremendous amount of time. However, if you use data that already exists in your tax rolls, in your permitting processes, you can make very accurate representations of what the homes in that neighborhood are typically designed around. They're 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, they're anywhere from 1,500 to 800 square feet, they're 1 story, and they're typically at this elevation. Come up with a model that just says, if you lived in this neighborhood and this is the approximate size of your house, and we know you got 8 to 12 inches of water, here is your reimbursement amount. We don't have to go out and look at every single home. It saves a tremendous amount of time, and it gets people back in their homes faster. Of course, there's an appeals process if they fall outside of that variance. But those are the things that we should be doing as disaster preparedness individuals and experts to help expedite the process when the disaster does happen. First, we want to use the data to predict it and be prepared for it. And second, when it does occur, use that same data to recover from it faster. We don't want to have another 11-year road home project. We don't want to have the Restore project take 7, 8, 9 years. We want this program to be over in 2 years, 3 years. It has to be fast. So we're urging you folks that are in the public policy area, please help us help you look at data and look at the ways we can use that data to affect positive public policy change in the way that we respond to these disasters. Thank you. Mr. Snow, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And it's my pleasure to introduce our third panelist for this session, Lamar Gardere, Executive Director of the Data Center. Lamar, in his role, is responsible for guiding the data center's mission of democratizing data into realistic action, ensuring quality standards and the ongoing impact of the organization. In addition, he's responsible for leading the data center's ongoing efforts to transform local culture to one that embraces data as an intrinsic component of sound decision-making. Lamar joined the data center after 6 years with the City of New Orleans Office of Information Technology and Innovation, most recently as Chief Information Officer. As CIO, he was responsible for delivering stable, value-added IT services to City of New Orleans employees and constituents, a task accomplished through the development of sustainable, forward-looking strategies for growth and expansion of IT services. Lamar is nationally recognized for his work implementing and developing the open data policy for the City of New Orleans. This work facilitated the release and upkeep of many of the city's most valuable data sets and led to the development of extensive data sharing resources now available through the City of New Orleans Open Data Portal. Please join me in welcoming Lamar Gardere.
Skipped a couple. I need a shorter bio, don't I? I'm going to stand too because I'm not that tall and I learned that lesson, so thank you for that lesson. So I'm Lamar Gardere, the I was the Chief Information Officer for the City of New Orleans. Excuse me, Kim, who's the current Chief Information Officer. I'm the Executive Director for the Data Center. I'm going to try to move through these points quickly. We're going to try to connect the dots between open data, civic tech, and something called digital equity. So it was not always the case that New Orleans did well in terms of data. In fact, that's a very new and recent development. The data center, it turns out though, was at the forefront of this development for the city opening in '97, really helping to profile neighborhoods, paint a picture of a neighborhood based on the publicly available data that was there in a way that community members could benefit from, that they could advocate for their own causes without having to rely on government or anybody else to put that data together. Well, good thing, because when Katrina hit, all of that data was absolutely necessary, and it turned out that the city was not in position to provide that data. So the data center stepped in and became the authoritative voice for recovery data. How many people are back in New Orleans? How many people are in each neighborhood? How are we doing overall in terms of the recovery? The data center is really where that data came from. Fortunately, in about 2011, the city, with the new administration, the Landry administration, decided that it was in its best interest to start making decisions from a data-driven perspective. And so put a lot of effort into gathering data, collecting it, cleaning it, making sure that it was high quality, and using it for its operations. One of the first things that we did was to create blight stat, which is the picture at the bottom right here. It was a meeting where city officials and department managers and department heads could come together and talk about city services, particularly around blight remediation and how the city was doing in terms of cleaning up the huge blight mess that Katrina created. In those early conversations, everybody was mad. Nothing would go fast enough. No recovery effort was fast enough. Whatever the city did, it was not good enough. You missed this spot. You missed this place. What about my neighbor's house? Nobody was satisfied with those conversations. So the city eventually decided to at least make the data open and available through the open data portal, so that everybody could have a look at the data that we were reporting out in those stat meetings. And you know what? It works. Fighting blight became a lot easier, because when people complained, we were able to tell them, go to the open data portal, you can see for yourself what's there and what's happening with this process. And suddenly the conversation turned from being really confrontational to being one of collaboration, where we could work together. Citizens were actually helping the city identify places where they had made mistakes or information that they missed, and the city took that feedback, went to our processes, went to our systems, and made those corrections. And at the next meeting, you could actually see that those things had been corrected. That capability would not have been available without the data being open and available to everybody to download and see and criticize and critique, and then having that back and forth available with the city. So in the fight against blight, open data was the way to go. So we also figured out that open data could be used as a tool to build trust, a tool for accountability and transparency. At the time, NOPD, the police department, was under consent decree and still is under consent decree, and we were looking for ways to help build trust, help grow accountability. Through the Obama administration and the Police Data Initiative, we had an opportunity to open police data up to the public. Now, obviously, the administration was very nervous about this. What happens when you release your most difficult data to the public, years of it for people to see? What conclusions will they draw? What problems will they find? So we were able to use the open data to collaborate with Operation Spark. It's a coding boot camp in New Orleans. So the police department, the city IT department, and Operation Spark collaborated to pre-release that data to a group of their students and some other stakeholders, letting the students go through the data, understand what was there, poke holes in it, ask questions. And what we found out was that people aren't going to be that critical of what's there, because they appreciate being able to see it and being able to have an open dialogue and conversation about it. So we actually had a great time at this event. This young lady is teaching the police chief how to code for the first time. His first line of code was NOPD.showRecords1000. It just showed a bunch of NOPD records, of course. But what this did, and you could actually see it happening, was the folks who were working directly with police officers or city folks were building trust in their civil service, the people that work for them, building trust in the data, because what they could see in real life was reflected in the data. If you have confidence in the data, you have confidence in the systems. If you have confidence in the systems, you tend to have a little more confidence confidence rather, in your government at large. So we learned that this process around open data absolutely helped to accomplish goals that we otherwise didn't quite know how to get to. If your data is open and available, you can do certain things with it. You can push forward on civic tech. You now have a platform that folks can use to build tools. This particular tool is called Blight Status. It's a collaboration with Code for America. So that's an important piece. Code for America, when they come to your town, they spend a lot of time with you, really interviewing your stakeholders, interviewing the public. They interview leaders inside of city government. They really try to understand the problem so that when they create a tool, it fits in with government bureaucracy. Not all bureaucracy is bad. Some of it is, some of it's necessary. And civic tech tools have to be built to fit in with that bureaucracy or they won't be adopted. They simply will not work well for the purposes of government. So by collaborating very closely, they were able to build something that connected into our existing systems, provided the kind of feedback that we could use and that citizens needed, and then gave citizens a way to communicate back with us. This application became a hit. I think it's probably still the most accessed web app that we have in the city because we worked together when we were building things. And that's what we suggest needs to happen all the time with civic tech, that it not just be the case that somebody has a great innovative idea and then you bring it to the city and say, here, use this, or worse, you find a news outlet who's able to pressure the city into doing it. It's not good adoption that way. Bring that good idea to your municipal government and work directly with them to figure out how to make that solution as effective as possible, how to make it fill as many gaps and holes as it can. You have much better adoption that way. And open data really supports that. But here's the thing. Even as New Orleans was doing well, not everything was going so great, right? The prosperity was not evenly shared. You can see here on the left side that jobs were doing very well. This is a chart of the recovery during the Great Recession. And you can see that New Orleans did well. Formerly, we were hanging out there with weak city metros. In this case, we far surpassed those weak city metros. We were surpassing what the country's rate of job recovery was, moving towards those aspirational cities. So New Orleans was ascended. We were doing pretty well. Unfortunately, what you can see also in the chart on the right, that you start to see some problems as it relates to wages. Those wages start to fall off. And unfortunately, when you dig into the data, you're able to see that not everybody was prospering in New Orleans. We had great disparities that existed pre-Katrina. That's a 1999 number. Katrina was 2005. And a 2013 number. You'll see that on the left side, we have white households. And this is a chart showing quintiles. If everything is exactly how it should be and completely balanced, each one of those quintiles would show 20%. So you see, pre-Katrina in 99, there were 21% of white households that were in the low-income category. If you go up that list, 25% were in the high-income category. Post-Katrina, the number of low-income went down. That's great. The number of high-income folks went up. That's also great. But when you look at the next chart, there's a disparity there that existed for black households. In 1999, 42% of households were in the low-income category. That's a pretty big gap. If you go up to the top, only 7% were high-wealth families. Post-Katrina, we didn't see the same prosperity, the same increase that we did for white households. In fact, it grew in terms of low-income households for black families from 42% to 44%. Everything else stayed about stagnant or got slightly worse. So we see that prosperity isn't enough. You have to be really intentional about how that prosperity looks. Right. So why is this important? It's partly important because New Orleans is 59% black and because demography is destiny. If your city is 59% black, and these are the outcomes for those people in your city is not going to fare very well. And you're going to have problems with maintaining prosperity. Across the country, and even in the New Orleans metro area, coming in the next few decades, the country will be majority-minority. If these kinds of disparities continue to exist for minority populations, the country is going to have a hard time maintaining prosperity. So demography matters in this case. So what the city decided to do was start an initiative called Equity New Orleans. Equity New Orleans was an intentional effort to make sure that everybody was sharing in the prosperity that was happening post-Katrina. You'll see that there's this idea about equality and equity. And in the equality image, everybody's getting the same help. In some cases, that means you've got more than you need to reach that Mardi Gras bead. In some cases, you still don't have what you need. On the equity side, though, and this is important, people get the help that they need to all be on the same playing field, a level playing field. Everyone has an opportunity to reach for that bead and get it so that they can have good outcomes in their own lives. The result of this is a stronger, more resilient, and more prosperous city. That's why it's important that we think about this as we move forward and we think about what smart growth really means. So each department head was, at the time I was CIO by this time, and each department head was challenged with how you think about equity within your department. How do you apply the equity lens within your department? Well, this is IT. It's computers and servers and networks and stuff like that. How do we think about equity in that space? Well, after thinking about it for a bit, we realized that everything comes through technology at this point. Internal government services, external services, all these different things of people's lives all touch technology. So we had an opportunity as IT to be a support and enabling function as it relates to equity. If we're able to make sure that people have equitable access to the resources that they need to be successful, then that's what the equity lens means for an IT organization. So essentially any group within city government could apply that equity lens to how they operate to make sure that services are provided effectively. So specifically, we created the Digital Equity Initiative, a collection of things to address the digital divide. The digital divide, of course, is the disparity between people who have good access to the internet and people who don't. We had a really broad definition of that digital divide, though. It included people who were not employed in technology, so we often see that minorities and women are not employed in technology at the appropriate rates. Well, we have to understand why you're underrepresented in that field. And it turns out it's not just because you're not interested in it. We had to realize that new technologies threaten to leave more people behind, something like Airbnb or Uber or automation or even autonomous vehicles, which are on the way. There's going to be an impact to those things on people who are more vulnerable. We have to come to that realization and figure out how to address it. A lack of diversity leads to less innovation. If you've got fewer perspectives, you're not able to be as innovative, and in some cases, you aren't creating the solutions that are required for the citizens in your city, because they simply don't share the perspective of the folks who are most vulnerable. So you end up having to offer a specific help, not just the same help. And people who are underrepresented in technology or don't have adequate access to those resources, it just exacerbates issues that are already a problem for these populations. So if we're doing digital equity right, what does it look like? It means that you have the ability to leverage technology to pursue whatever you want to, professionally, personally, your civic goals. You have access to opportunities, meaning if you want to be a content creator, you can create content. If you want to go after a new job, you have the ability to find that new job online and create the resume that's going to be effective in getting that new job. You have the ability to pursue multiple career pathways. It's harder for you to end up unemployed and not be able to find new employment if you can leverage technology, if your skill set is not one that is easily outdated by technology. If you're able to do those things, then there are some social, economic, and resilience benefits that individuals see and that society sees. So I want to close and head on to the panel, but parting thoughts are cities are often unprepared for disruptive technologies. There's a study recently by Enrico Burks, which essentially says innovation and urban inequity go hand in hand, meaning that as disruptive technologies occur, somebody's going to end up left behind as a result of that disruptive technology. I think it's cities' responsibility to see those technologies early on as they're happening, not try to fight them, not try to figure out how to keep them out of their city, but figure out how to embrace it as quickly as possible and understand what the impact of that technology is going to be on your population. Maybe there's a way to leverage that technology for the benefit of the population if you get to it on the front end. If not, it could be one of those things that further creates inequity. And then an increasingly digital world, and government threatens to leave people behind. Think about it. If I don't have good access to the internet, but my government is moving services online, I effectively now can't access city services. If I can't access those city services, I'm going to be at a greater disadvantage to other people, right? So if you focus on equity, you have the ability to have broad prosperity that is sustainable in your city. There's an opportunity for more inclusivity, more innovation, and to increase resilience in your population. So that's digital equity for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamar, and thanks to all three of you. We've got about 10 minutes for Q&A from the audience. If anyone has a question, we've got a mic floating around here, I believe. Just raise your hand and they'll come to you. Right over here.
As far as GovSpend, the data comes directly from the agency itself. So however they record their records is what you will see in our system. So as far as the quality of data, that's really what it relies on. So if an agency buys a printer, they can just type in printer, but if they buy the M451DN, like the example, it'll be easier to match up to find an apples-to-apples comparison. As far as the security goes, we use Amazon Web Services to host our service. We trust that their security is top-notch, across the nation, as well as internal data team that could speak probably more intelligently about that than I am, because that's their job. I'm just here to educate everybody. But I know that, past 5 years, we have not had any breaches, and that's definitely number one security.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Lamar, I do have one for you while everyone's thinking about it. I know when you deal with so much data and you have so much to prioritize in terms of where do I start, what do we tackle, how do we do it, what's the best way that, based on your experiences, that other cities or municipalities can prioritize kind of key strategies in terms of a starting point?
Sure. Let me try to take this off. So I think there's two parts to your question. There is, how does a nonprofit like us think about what data to focus on? And then there's, how does a government think about what data to focus on? Governments have certain initiatives that they are going to be interested in moving forward on, right? And those initiatives are going to be based on citizen needs or wherever your pain points are within your government. So you're going to want to look at those issues that you have to focus on. Look at your systems associated with it. If you have systems that are high quality and can provide good data, and that data can contribute to decision making in that space, then that's a prime target for you to go after in terms of pulling data out of that system and leveraging it for the benefit of that initiative. You're also going to want to make data available that actually makes it clear what the progress is on that initiative. It's not very important if you can't use that data to actually measure performance, to actually understand something about the work that needs to be done. So you're focusing on initiatives, looking at the health of your systems, and then thinking about what the impact of that data could be on the problem. Sort of on the other side for us, when we think about what data to go after, we are looking at problem areas out in the city. What are areas that are that we understand people are concerned about, having problems with, but data, decisions are being made in the absence of data. In other words, people are making decisions and they are not informed. They may be being informed by anecdotes, maybe personal feelings or personal philosophies. ideologies perhaps, maybe constituents pushing in some direction in some cases, but not informed by data. That's a clear area where we're going to want to jump in, and we're going to want to analyze that data, understand what the situation is, what the situation is, and then create briefs and reports specifically around it, making it clear what the actual situation is and what the ramification of certain policy decisions might be.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Right over there.
As a city or a public agency, how do you help to mitigate those problems while also making sure you have kind of that robust data that gives you some direction and allows for the kind of prioritization you need to go through?
So I think it's the number one concern that cities have when you think about opening data. But here's the thing. The data may have identified the problem, but that problem wasn't a secret before, right? If you had problems around blight, your citizens see that there are problems around blight. Somebody's reporting on it. Somebody's complaining about it. Something is happening. If you've got issues around policing, people already know that there are issues around policing. Or if it's affordable housing, it's already known. It's not a secret. So typically when you open the data, you're not uncovering additional liability. In fact, you're showing additional transparency and accountability, saying, well, here is the issue. Here's what it looks like. Here's the size of the issue that we're facing. Let's figure out how we're going to do this together, right? And you turn the conversation around from just the city has a problem, the city government has a problem, to we as a larger city, we have a problem that we want to fix. Help us to do it together. Let's bring the tech sector in to try to figure out what the solutions might be. Let's bring philanthropy in to think about how they can bring resources to bear on these problems. So you see more opportunities for help than you do for liability when you make the data open and publicly available.
And I'll add on to that for you, Logan. In the instance of disaster recovery, where you have typically a lot of very publicly available data, homeowner name, homeowner address, homeowner phone number, which back when I was growing up, that was published in the yellow pages or the white pages, which those don't exist anymore. That's all fine and well to divulge that, but you also have very personal information like income data. You may have health information data. So being able to segment those data sources out and redact certain data elements before making them publicly accessible through an open data initiative is extremely important. And again, the gentleman I think that asked another question about how you keep it secure, he walked out, but that is a very large focus, and security and information security is a very large focus on all these efforts to ensure that that data stays very well contained and within the database is encrypted. So even if someone got into the database and they tried to look at someone's social security number, they wouldn't be able to see that. That particular element itself would be totally encrypted inside the database.
Great question. Right over here.
Thanks. This is kind of piggybacking off of that, but at what point, I know that data collection and management can be a very lucrative industry and it's very expensive. At what point does publicizing data make it too easy for someone maybe to make money off of something that normally would be, you know, informing policy decisions and such? A private business owner can certainly, you know, take that data and turn it into whatever he or she wants to do. At what point is that, you know, okay for them to be, you know, using that data, or maybe it's not? Just kind of want an opinion on that.
So let's take an example. Let's take the blight data, for example, that New Orleans has. Why would that be an issue if, say, for instance, a developer who wanted to invest in that community could go in there and say, gosh, I've got a whole sector of this area of town that has a tremendous amount of blight. I'm willing to invest my time and money into redeveloping that neighborhood. So in that essence, it's a good thing for the neighborhood to have that data out there. Otherwise, they would not even know that that existed without having to physically drive around town and map that data on their own. So there's so much good that can come out of producing this data publicly, whether it's crime statistics, blight statistics. There's so much good that can come out of it. There's always going to be someone out there that wants to use that in some nefarious fashion. but the odds of that happening weighed against the benefits. The benefits far outweigh what could potentially be the negatives of that. And the open data portal that the city of Baton Rouge has, I mean, I was on there last night. There is a tremendous amount of data that I think probably 99% of the citizens of Baton Rouge don't even know it's there. But if they did know it was there, they could easily find ways to capitalize on using that data, either for their own personal use, or if you're a startup company. I mean, we're here in Baton Rouge trying to promote technology companies moving to this area, and they have data sets that they can create applications that would so benefit this area. So we need to publicize using that and get more data out there. As long as it's de-identified, if it has personal identifiers, that's good to go. But I think we need to do more. We don't need to do less. We don't need to restrict access. We need to promote access.
I think that's exactly right. I agree with that 100%. We want people to take this data and figure out how to innovate on it and create new industries and create new revenue streams, create new jobs in the city, things like that. That blight status application, that became somebody's job. Somebody's a business, their startup, right? They couldn't sell it back to us, but they sold that product in other places across the country. That's a good thing. That's a benefit. I didn't mention, but there's a company called Civic Source that uses our data to auction adjudicated property. Real estate agents use the open data that we have available on property records to do their job better. I mean, we absolutely want people to take that data, figure out how to create new industries around it, and bring in more tax dollars. So that it's a good thing. I'm certain that there is a case in which somebody would feel like you're taking advantage of the data, but we absolutely want folks to leverage it. Otherwise, what's the use of having this data just sitting around? You know, let's make it useful. Let's put it to work.
Great. One last question.
So, quick question about the process of procurement. So, one of the biggest challenges that we have in this area is not allowing or not enabling minority-owned businesses to have access to some of these opportunities. There's all the stats that pretty much say 2% of all receipts in Orleans Parish are for this specific demographic, and that doesn't have that equitable opportunity. So I was curious, as your webpage specifically, does it have opportunities to look beyond just the cost and look into some of those social factors, whether it's a DB, whether it's some kind of organization that has a social purpose as well?
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge importance. I know depending on the state, you said 2%. Other states have 3%. And the federal agencies always fill out that classification box. We call it socioeconomics. So if it's a minority-owned business or a veteran disabled-owned business, it's very easy to just click yes or no and find a list of vendors. And you could also do it for principal place of performance to see where they're based at, because you also want to buy local. It doesn't always come down to price. Like, if I was a police officer, I wouldn't skimp on a bulletproof vest. I would spend top dollar to protect my life. So don't think it's just all about bottom dollar here. But when it does come down, we want you to be able to find local vendors. So we have a zip code radius as well, because you might not know that the city or county next door is working with so-and-so for maybe tree trimming services or selling a certain product. So it's now figuring out who else is in your community now, because you want to give them your business. And that's how we're bringing everybody together. And if agencies on a state and local level fill out that criteria on their purchases, if it is a minority-owned business or a woman-owned business, then we'll be able to track that. Whatever data we get in is data that we put out for you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Please join me in just another round of applause for these three individuals for their time. Thank you, guys. All right, we're going to take a quick 15-minute break to go and get lunch in the Lamar Atrium. Back in here at 11:40 for a special presentation honoring the Downtown Development District's 30th anniversary, honoring Davis Rohr, featuring Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. See you guys in a little bit.